Hello. Good morning. Welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners policy session for June 29, 2021. Gary, what's up first?
Hello, Chair Smith. All commissioners are present. Commissioner Schrader is on her way. I'm adding an item to your agenda, which is not listed, and that is, with all of the extreme heat we are facing in Clackamas County and our region right now, does the county commissioners want to consider in any way considering a fireworks ban for the 4th of July due to the weather conditions? I'm putting this on the table for you to discuss. What information do you need to make that decision? We have staff here from disaster management who can answer your questions, and public health. Just want to open that up for a conversation on what you think about that.
Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, my question is basically who's the responsible party to make the call? I mean, I don't know exactly what Portland or the Portland Fire, I'm not sure who this morning took the action, but is it the fire district that takes the action? Who makes that call?
I've got to call into the Fire Defense Board, but I think for the incorporated cities that they would make the call, and we can also talk with the Fire Defense Boards to make sure that we're in line with them. But for the unincorporated parts of the county, I would recommend that you consider it.
Daniel, I did not hear correctly because I'm having trouble hearing with the mask on. Could you restate who makes the final call on a fireworks ban?
So we're actually checking all of that out, but a couple of years ago when we looked at this, I think county council's checking on this. I think that the commissioners can do something for unincorporated. We cannot do it for the cities. It is preferred that the fire districts or fire agencies actually make the call, but we have not at least I have not seen any information from them that they're going to be doing that. And Daniel is trying to get a hold of the Fire Defense Board chief to ask that question.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't want to overstep the advice of the fire districts, but the same token is getting their input on this and doing it collaboratively. So I don't know if Nancy in your previous role and Daniel in your new role, is there a table that you all meet to discuss matters, not necessarily like this, but emergency related, where, there can be a convening for that discussion?
That would definitely be the Fire Defense Board, and so I'm reaching out to the Fire Defense Board chief, and he does a great job of coordinating with the other fire chiefs. So I've got a call and a text message into him, so I will let you know what I find out as soon as I find it out.
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot of emails and a lot of concerns, and I share some of those concerns, but I also understand that can be a hardship on those who count on that revenue from the fireworks sales. Boy Scouts and a number of organizations that do it for nonprofit for good cause. But I think we have an exceptional situation this year. So, is it possible we could learn something like that here in the next day? Maybe if there's any action, we could take that possibly Thursday if there's an action?
You will have to take action on Thursday because that's your last meeting before the 4th of July, so yes.
I will make a comment, but Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, the legal fireworks that's sold in Oregon is not the problem. The problem is illegal fireworks that come into the state, and it's already illegal. So saying we're going to shut them down is still going to happen. What we can do is work with the Sheriff's Department to increase observation and citations for those who violate that law. Thank you.
I think that's a good point. My next question is, does Clackamas Fire cover all unincorporated county? And is there a loophole in that?
Clackamas Fire does not. So like Canby Fire, Moala, Colton, Sandy, all of those have parts of unincorporated.
So there's still sections of unincorporated county that would fall under this jurisdiction?
Yes. So part of the challenges is just that, right? We have all of these fire districts we have 15 fire districts in this county, and all but 2 of them have part of the unincorporated areas. Okay. So there's that issue of enforcement, and what does that look like?
Okay, I'm going to recommend that staff who is currently gathering information come back sometime today and make a final report to us, and then this board can take action if need be.
Will do.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yep, so we'll come back this afternoon with what you have learned. Okay, very good. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff. Next, COVID-19 updates. We have a lot to update you on, commissioners, as well as ask you to consider changing your emergency declaration related to COVID-19. We have Philip Mason Joyner, Public Health Director, Daniel Nibauer, Interim Disaster Management Director, Nancy Bush, County Operations Officer, and myself will all present a portion of this. We'll start with Philip, though. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Last Friday, I assume the whole community has heard the news that Governor Brown signed a recovery-focused executive order lifting all remaining COVID-19 health and safety restrictions once Oregon achieves a 70% first dose adult vaccination rate, or by tomorrow, Wednesday, June 30th, whichever comes first. As of this morning, we checked, Oregon has a little over 19,000 more people to go in order to reach that 70% metric. So these changes will go into effect tomorrow. What this means, business restrictions and the state's risk level framework, it all goes away tomorrow. Businesses can operate at full capacity. And also the Oregon Department of Education, they released new guidance yesterday. What that said is essentially that this fall, they anticipate our schools will be going back to 5 days a week in-person instruction, and the Ready Safe Learner guidance becomes advisory in a local school decision. Additionally, indoor face covering requirements, physical distancing requirements, and the expectation that our local businesses have to screen for vaccine verifications for individuals to not have to wear a mask, those all go away. There are some places where face coverings are still required, healthcare settings, other high-risk congregate settings where folks come together, like the county jail, for example, public transit. There'll still be places in the community where masks will be required, but it's a lot more rare. This news has been long awaited. It's a really important and positive milestone that's been met for Clackamas County and the state. A large enough portion of our population has been vaccinated. They're protected from severe illness and death from COVID-19. But I do want, as your public health director, to share that it's really important that there's still spread of COVID in the community. The pandemic's not technically over, so if you are unvaccinated, we recommend you get vaccinated as soon as possible, or that you please continue to follow precautions to protect yourself, your family, your friends, and your community. In the months to come, the Public Health Division will continue to do the work that we've been doing since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, when Oregon had their first case that arrived here in our county, continuing with our contact tracing efforts, disease investigation, access to testing, and providing low barrier access to vaccinations for the public in coordination with partners. Today we have a few actions we'd like to discuss with the board. As Gary mentioned, a proposal to amend the existing COVID-19 local emergency declaration that expires at the end of the calendar year to a recovery-based declaration that aligns with these changes. And then County Administrator Schmidt would like to discuss the impact on our local government operations here at the county, specifically around the temporary face covering policy and physical distancing protocols.
Thank you, Philip. We will discuss those two items coming up on the agenda. I have a question for you. You said healthcare settings. I had a question from a doctor in private practice that owns a large clinic, and he obviously has been in compliance, and he wants to know, are face coverings required at that private clinic?
Yes, they are, at this time, yes.
As I assumed they were. Any other questions for Philip at this time? Gary?
Okay, so quickly sticking on the June 30th date. So as of tomorrow, June 30th, you know this, commissioners, all county employees and visitors to the public buildings of Clackamas, public visitors to Clackamas County buildings will no longer be required to wear masks of any kind. Social distancing policies will end. And we will not be checking vaccination status, period. So whether you're vaccinated or not, no one needs to wear a mask starting tomorrow, Wednesday, June 30th, in any county building for both employees and visitors to the buildings. However, if someone chooses to wear a mask for whatever reason, I encourage, whether it's us or anyone, that they're allowed to do that. They're welcome to do that. We will not challenge or criticize them or show disrespect. So I remind that to employees especially, but also members of the public, please, if someone chooses to wear a mask, that's their choice. So please don't say, why are you wearing a mask? But rather, that's the individual choice of the person. But it's not required as of tomorrow, Wednesday, June 30th. So just want to update you all on that. Next, let's talk about the declaration.
Gary, before we move on.
Sorry, yes.
We are asking people, we are not asking people whether they have been vaccinated either.
Correct. We are not checking vaccination status of anyone.
Okay, we are not checking vaccination status of anyone. Let that be very clear. Gary, please continue.
Thank you.
Chair,
Oh, yes,
if I may,
Commissioner Savas.
I have my light on. So I just did want to just say, could you just touch on, I don't want this lost. I don't think anyone really does if they really think about it, but getting back to the vaccination campaign to encourage and continue to set up sites, can you give us a sketch going forward of what that might look like, or a picture, thumbnail sketch of what that looks like?
All summer long, we will continue to provide the regular sites every week across the county in coordination with, well, it's public health staff and then whole lot of partners. That work will continue this summer. I was actually at our Clackamas Town Center site on Friday afternoon at the mall. Still a line of folks. I think we vaccinated over 60 folks on Friday. So there's certainly still the need out in the community. We will continue to work with partners to make sure the vaccine is available, to make it easy for folks, and also continue to work with partners around providing information on the education about the vaccine, the safety, and address those concerns for folks who are hesitant at this time going forward.
I say that for the obvious, and I just also want to point out one other thing. I mean, I can't help but notice, and it just maybe it's my analytics, but I can't help but notice that we had a big step up in the cases when schools partially opened, and now we're on the decline. Granted, the vaccinations are playing a role in some of that, but knowing that school's around the corner and people want to get this, I think we have a community benefit, frankly, for those, no one's being forced to, but for those who are thinking about that school and trying to make it be part of the solution, that we continue to encourage vaccination. So as we prepare for winter and the colder weather and all those things that bring people back indoors again and those congregate settings. So, now's the time, I think, to ramp up for the colder weather and for schools and all those other settings. So just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that.
Thank you.
Well, aren't vaccines available at most of the pharmacies in the county?
They certainly are,
And
yes.
that's not going to stop.
Yes, and we will, I'm very proud of Clackamas County, the work we've done with our 10 school districts to provide vaccinations on site at schools. That will be something we will do again later this summer, early fall, to continue to reach folks.
Thank you. Any further questions for the presenter on this particular topic? Gary, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I do have a question. This kind of goes back to your previous, but say a business wanted to require face masks or any other restrictions, are businesses able to do that, or are they prohibited from doing that?
I believe I'm looking at our county council, but I believe that a business could set a policy.
I haven't seen it yet, Commissioner, but we'd have to wait to see what the governor's order says. But just like no shoes, no service, a private business could state that they might have underlying health conditions that require their clientele to wear face coverings.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I suppose at that point, it would be up to the customer whether they would want to go to that business or not. Again, it's a choice, right? Thank you very much, Gary.
All right. Next, related to this, next topic is the emergency declaration. Staff is recommending addendum number 9 to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, which in essence strips all, sunsets everything except a few minor components. So who would like to discuss this?
So,
Stephen?
Daniel, you start.
Okay. So the point is to get rid of a lot of the different amendments and restrictions in there, keeping really just 2. And that is the 4th Amendment, which looks at the ability to continue to do virtual meetings as needed, as well as the 8th Amendment, which looks at some of the permitting applications, particularly in there, is looking at expanded restaurants and the ability for businesses to have that larger area for a whole bunch of reasons, to keep the additional capacity, help support our businesses after they've taken that larger loss, to continue to bring in perhaps have additional capacity, as well as if we see a need to have those restrictions back in place. They haven't taken all those down. It also allows us to stay a little bit more nimble, take advantage of grant opportunities that come in, and continue to provide clinics and be able to sign agreements a little bit faster, but removing the rest of the restrictions that are on there, and it keeps the declaration still to the end of the year.
We're also keeping the land use waivers intact, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Applications, we made an allowance on that for an extension.
Yes.
Yes, of building permits. That will stay, correct.
Correct.
So I'd like to just add to what Daniel is saying. This takes us into recovery. We will this is very similar to what we have for wildland fires, just for the public. So we have something in place that takes us into recovery, and as Daniel says, to make us more nimble. It is still a declaration, but it's for recovery.
If this is a declaration of full recovery. Yee-haw. Yes, and we'll continue with vaccination clinics, I suppose, sites. Okay. Gary, what is our action on this?
So unless you have any edits you'd like to discuss today, we will bring this to your business meeting this Thursday for formal ratification of addendum number 9.
Do we need a motion for this today?
Stephen, a motion?
Stephen, do we-
No.
No motion necessary today, this is just for your own information. We'll do the formal agreement on Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Do you have any edits or changes you'd like to see right now you would like to suggest?
No, not this time, other than just seeing the document as soon as it's completed, so that
Yes.
in preparation for
I
Thursday.
put it in your packet last night, so there was a
Yeah,
draft.
I'm reading it right now.
It's right there.
Oh, so there's no suggested changes from what it looks like last night? That's what
No.
I'm talking about, is the changes.
No.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, we'll bring to this Thursday's business meeting for your formal adoption. All right, I just had one more topic, and that's board meetings, but was there anything else for our topics? Okay, so the last component is commissioners. Now that the mask and social distancing requirements are ending, I do propose this Thursday's business meeting, we keep this format just because it's set. We don't have to wear masks anymore, but keep this format. But starting next week, what would you like to do as far as your board meetings on Tuesdays for work sessions and Thursdays for business meetings? I actually propose you go back to your pre-COVID life of how we had setups, which is on Tuesday work sessions. We had a U-shaped table on the floor right here for all commissioners to sit at. Staff would come up to the table to present at their appointed time, and then the audience, public or staff, would sit in the room to observe. We could still have Zoom working with the stationary cameras in the room, so members of the public could observe, although they don't comment, and staff could observe and not mean they have to sit in the room waiting for their turn. They could be at their desk doing other work and then come in as needed. But it would have the more intimate setting where you could have a more informal conversations on policy discussions rather than today with the tiers you have. And then Thursday business meetings, back to how you did it. We'll get rid of these extra tables. Everyone's at the dais. The room full for the public to attend if they wish, but we could also keep Zoom as well for those members of the public who wish to participate via Zoom. That is my recommendation, but I'm seeking your direction on how you'd like to set up the room next week.
Well, Gary, I personally like that. As chair who conducts the meetings, and my fellow commissioners are in the queue, I really like the Tuesday setup on the floor because I can see you and I can communicate with you easier, and I think we can have a more full and fruitful conversation. I also pick up on a lot of verbal cues, nonverbal cues, when somebody wants to speak. And it's important to me as a communicator that I am engaged with you all. And like, for instance, I have trouble with Commissioner Fisher, and sometimes she's delayed on signaling to me. It goes through Shannon. By the time the red light pops on, I see your red light is on now, Commissioner Fisher. Thank you. But you understand what we're talking about. Additionally, Commissioner Savas, I see the top of his head, and sometimes the light isn't on, but I can pick up on Commissioner Savas's nonverbal cues when he wants to speak. For me, it helps me communicate. I like the dais up here. I think the dais is important in our public meetings because it sets a tone for the people who come in, and I believe it's a very professional tone, and we're here to do business. I see a couple commissioners. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, Gary, I like your recommendation, as I heard, Tuesday back to the U-shaped tables. and doing I like that with the Zoom and so forth. But I do want to make one thing. I would like, when you mentioned staff, I think it's an efficient use of the technology for them not to necessarily be in the room. But I do want to, just one nuance is, wherever possible, that if staff are presenting, that they're present in the room. Yes. That's the only thing that I would prefer, because it's not always the best communication tool when we're live and they're not. So I think that would be an added bonus.
Yes, it's my expectation staff present in person to the board, yet between when they're presenting, they can be at their desks watching observing the meeting without having to sit in the room. Yes.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, Gary, I like your recommendation. I also really like being able to see my commissioners, which is part of the reason why I've liked to sit here during this time. And I know that when we're all up there in a line, we do not be able to communicate with the looking at one another. It just doesn't work. And so I don't really like the dais setup. I was really moved when we went out to Grand Ronde and saw how they did their tribal council, which was kind of more in a U shape, which was seemed to be more conducive to communication and being able to see nonverbal communication. So I'm just throwing that out there as we look towards the future as to how we want to conduct business. Obviously, we're not going to make that change right now, but.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher, on that. So Gary, do you have clear direction?
Yes, so we will go back to the pre-COVID days of room setup for Tuesdays and Thursdays with the change of keeping Zoom for members of the public and our staff, and I guess you as well, commissioners, if you want your laptop in front of you. So we'll do that starting next week. So again, if you're okay, this Thursday, we'll keep the setup as is, so staff can't turn the room that quick. But next Thursday, we'll be prepared for this new setup. And then quickly, executive session then, back in the hearing room, in person, starting next Tuesday, if that is acceptable to you all.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay.
In-person executive session.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, very good. I think that's it for this portion of our COVID updates. Anything else that I'm missing, Philip, Daniel, Nancy, on this portion? Okay, any other questions for Philip or Daniel before they step away? Not seeing.
Then a big thank you for bringing us to this point. So I think everyone played a role in getting us to this point, statewide and locally, so it's appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I'm just curious about staff returning to county buildings and where we are with that process.
Thank you for asking. Yes, on Tuesday, July 6th, 100% of county staff will be returning to county buildings with these caveats. Hybrid work is still allowable, so if some employees, due to their work situation, or with permission of their managers and supervisors, pending that the public is still being served, which they are, some employees may work remotely some part of the week, but they are also expected to be in person part of the week as well. It's up to managers and supervisors to determine that how much is in person, how much is remote. There are a minor amount of exceptions I've made for a few work units to remain entirely remote until September. Those are very few, less than 50 employees total that I've allowed that. But otherwise, all employees are returning. About half of employees have already returned as of June 1st, but all the rest will be returning on July 6th. And I look forward to welcoming them back to the county buildings.
Great. Are we going to have a good picnic this year? Is that in planning?
Actually, I believe the decision was already made a few months ago because it's about a 4-month window to prepare that the county picnic will not be in person this year. We'll do the hybrid model we did last year because they had to start planning months ago.
Darn it.
But 2022, for sure.
Okay, Gary.
Okay.
Any other comments for Gary on this topic?
Great. Thank you, Philip and Daniel. Still on the COVID topic, next American Rescue Plan Act update. Nancy Bush, can you give an update, please, on where we're at since we last talked about this?
Yeah. Good morning. So we do have a lot going on here. I just want to update you. We have the criteria that is still being developed, but we're getting much closer. We have a lot of conversations around how to make it equitable as well as fair. So we know there's still a lot of money coming out. We're going to hear about that more and more at the 1st of July. I think there's going to be more in February from what I understand from the state. But when we're looking at our dollars now, we can't worry about what happens in February. So we're working on that. We will use a process that's very similar to the small grant process that the county has set up. So Caroline Hill is helping us with that and the application. And we are looking at our committee members who, to do the review, which will be some committee members. We're hoping, of course, there will be some people from internal in the county, and just taking that broad look. We do expect to have a lot more applications than probably we do have funding. So we want to make sure that we keep track of that. We want to be very transparent. PGA is working on providing a plan for how we're going to communicate beginning now as we go through this process and we move forward, so we can have that transparent. We're close to getting the buckets and how much money is going into each bucket identified. We're going to be talking about what the first 41 million, what's that immediate need, what are maybe some of the capital projects that can go in the second 41 million, which we're getting in no more than a year or a little bit later. We will have that information for you on July 13th. Is the expectation.
Nancy, the expectation is that people who want this will apply.
Yes,
And there's
especially
an
like for the
application form
CBOs.
to be filled out, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We had a good conversation this morning around some of the freshwater, the wastewater, clean water agencies. There is some contradictory language that currently exists in the the guidance that we have. So we did talk to, Greg Geist is on the committee, and he was saying that a lot at the state level or the federal level are taking a look at that and giving that feedback. So those are some of the things we're still really struggling with, because when you have contradictory language, it's like, well, which way does it go? So we're hoping to see that cleaned up. Dave DeVore, who is also on our team, is looking at the dollars too for broadband. One of the things we want to try to encourage is that the ARPA right now is the most flexible. There's a lot of broadband money out there that we can't apply for because of the restrictions they put on it. I think we've had that conversation. We're not a metropolitan county, but we're also not rural. And unfortunate, we are very rural in many areas. So there's some issues around that. So we're hoping to keep the ARPA dollars that are very flexible around that particular piece as well. And that is my update for now. There's a lot going on.
Gary, any additions to Nancy's report?
We're going to talk about service award for employees next, but as far as her current report, no, other than we're going to come back to you in July, which is next week, in the next 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
It'll be the 13th.
On July 13th, to actually recommend to you commitments on how to spend the first 40 million. The time has come, and we want you to, we'll recommend you to make some decisions at that point.
Okay, Gary, up next.
All right, next, related to ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, is a service award for essential employees. So commissioners, I've been talking about this for about 8 months now, and in particular when Chair Smith took office, she also brought this up as well, and that how are we going to recognize employees who are deemed essential and critical who worked on site during the initial days of the initial months of the pandemic, when we had no idea how severe or dangerous this pandemic would be to the health and safety of everyone. There were a number of county employees that in order to still serve the public, they worked on site during those very dangerous days and put themselves at great personal risk and their families. Every employee worked diligently, worked very, very hard during the pandemic. Practically no one lost their jobs. I'm very proud of that. We were able to retain the jobs of our employees, except our tourism department, unfortunately, we had to lay off that entire department because of the funding that dried up from tourism taxes. But other than that, no county employees lost their jobs, and I'm very proud of that because our hardworking employees were able to keep doing their work to the public. Yet those that got the opportunity to work remotely, I will say it because I did as well, they had a benefit those who worked on site did not. So commissioners, Nancy and I have been working with our department directors, our union leadership, to come up with a proposal to you on how to recognize those essential critical employees that worked on site during those initial months of COVID last year and recognize them with a reward. that will be funded through the American Recovery Plan Act dollars. So Nancy, I'm sorry, I probably took more of the tea up there, but
It's
can you
okay.
explain a bit more of the background and then what we're proposing today, please?
Yeah. So as Gary's mentioned, we've had a large team work on this, all of the department directors as well as HR. Eric Serra has also been a very big part of this as well. So we asked the department directors in a very short time frame to provide us with a list of those that fit within the definition that we provided to them. I received all of that information yesterday, took a look at it. There's still some detail we have to work out and some things that we do have to refine from that. But I just want to thank all the department directors and their staff for getting that pulled together. So what we're proposing is that when we have the final list, the $2,500 to they each would get $2,500 to $3,500, depending on how many we have. And at this time, we're not recommending that the leave be a part of that. And the reason is it is very complex. It's not equitable. It's really expensive and to do that. We have not received information yet, too, to make sure that leave would be covered under ARPA. But if it is, of course, you can imagine how much more expensive that does start getting in trying to work those issues out. So today, we're asking for $3 million from ARPA funding to go to the recognition of employees that were critical and essential at the bulk of especially at the beginning of this event when many of us did not know what was going to happen to us or our families. And that is our ask for today.
Nancy, when you say, or Gary, on site, in the beginning of this, I think many employees for I don't know how many weeks, I wasn't here, were not on site initially, but then came back and were on site for what, 90% of the time, 75% of the time? Do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, so back in March through May 2020, we closed the buildings to the public and sent the majority of employees home, but there were still employees that worked on-site even then, so it never left. In addition, after the initial period, employees did come back to work while others did stay remote. The initial run we asked with directors, I'll say it, there was about 1,100 employees identified, which I don't believe that's accurate. So I think it was much lower than that, which is why we need to confirm the numbers with you. But I believe it's around 600 to 800 employees out of our 2,200 employees.
2,200 employees, yeah. That would, is my sense, although I wasn't here. I can't personally speak to that. I don't know if any commissioner can. Well, so you're asking for an approval of $3 million today from the ARP funds for essential employee
Yes, ma'am.
payments.
Yes.
And Gary, is that the form of a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved?
Second?
Commissioner Savas has moved the motion and Commissioner Schrader has seconded. Do we have comments or questions? Commissioner Scholl? Oh, I'm sorry.
You mentioned that the award would be $2,500 to $3,500.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to pick an amount that goes to everybody who qualifies, or is there some sort of scale here?
Our plan is to pick an amount that would go to everyone.
Thanks.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, so that was sort of my question. So you'll just take that 3 million and divide it by how many employees and then give that amount to everyone?
Yes. There could be some people that get prorated depending on when they were hired, but in general, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, my understanding, and just all I need is a head nod from Gary, that basically the people we're trying to recognize here are those that came in, exposed themselves to a higher risk than others, and so on. It's not necessarily how much time or hours they work, even though some did some incredible work. I want to acknowledge that, but more that put themselves in harm's way by the nature of their job showing up here at the county or their offices.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, Shannon, please take the poll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Gary and Nancy, for that.
Thank you, commissioners, for showing this support for our employees. Nancy and I will come up with a very detailed plan. We'll let you know first, and then the employees know exactly the number of employees and how this will be distributed. But you've given us the guidance now that we can move forward, the approval to move forward on that action. Thank you. Next, state legislative session recap. We've had a very successful legislative session. Sue Hildick, Director of Public and Government Affairs, will tee it off. She is online, and Chris Lyons, Government Affairs Manager, is here in the room. So Sue, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I have to bring her in.
Sorry, she's not here yet. 1 second, please. And then Chris, when you're done, you signal me and we'll talk about the courthouse.
Great.
Thank you.
Sorry, we need you to unmute.
Good morning, commissioners. I hope everybody's nice and cool. The Oregon legislature adjourned on Saturday after a 5-month session, and it was a session like no other. In many ways, the pandemic was certainly the focus. And for a historical first, the the Oregon Capitol building actually never opened to the lobby or constituents. It was all conducted over Zoom. And so now we count Zoom as an advocacy tool. It was a high water mark for Clackamas County. All of our legislative priorities were achieved. And for that, we want to make sure and give a lot of thanks to the Clackamas caucus. Those members had 100% success rate with their priorities that they picked for, and Chris will detail those for you. We also want to thank the Board of County Commissioners and all the departments heads who were so responsive to us and who really reached out and made clear how these state and federal dollars will really leverage the future in Clackamas County. And finally, I really want to thank our government affairs team of Chris Lyons and Trent Wilson, who did a fantastic job sort of following all the loose ends. I think I've told you before, I can't remember a time when we had earmarks at the federal and the state level going at the same time, and that was a lot of coordination. So with that said, I want to turn it over to Chris to give you the details.
Morning, Commissioners. Session adjourned on Saturday at 5:38 p.m., and it was 1 day shy of their 160-day limit. And this session, there were over 2,500 bills. The county tracked over 1,600 of these, and we had positions on 41 of them. So I'm going to quickly run through the highlights of what we are mostly paying attention to, and feel free to ask any questions you have. So courthouse, we were authorized our requested $94.5 million in the bond authorization bill. In addition to that, and we'll talk about this at the end of the presentation, there was a budget note in a separate bill that requires OJD and the county to provide a joint report back to the Ways and Means Committee to answer a handful of questions about the P3 before the legislature approves the expenditure of those authorized funds. So all in all, though, great news. And as Sue mentioned, a huge thank you to the entire Clackamas caucus. All the members were really fighting for this one. Second, the I-205 Bottleneck project. In the last few days of session, the Omnibus Transportation Bill passed, HB 3055. And that one included that flexible penny that is now going to be able to be used by both the I-205 project and the Boone Bridge project, as well as tolling more generally in the region to stand that up. But what it means practically is that per ODOT, in the spring, they will begin construction on the 205 project, specifically the Abernathy Bridge. In addition, in that bill, the county also now has authority to conduct speed settings on county roads, which was a request we had made. So I'd like to thank Rep. Prusak and the entire Clackamas caucus for really pushing that one through. Fourth priority was our Sunrise Gateway Corridor Community Visioning concept that we had put forward. We got the requested $4 million in the end of session, what's known as the Christmas tree bill. And that's now going to result in a 2-year project to move that effort forward. And on that one, Reps. Bynum and Drazen were our big champions, as well as the entire caucus again. And then fourth, the Willamette Falls locks. And this was, we had a couple priorities here, both passing the Public Corporation Bill, which passed a couple months ago, to establish that public corporation, as well as at the end of session, we got $7.25 million to help with restoration of the locks. So that was a big win, and again, the caucus was a big advocate. And I'll point out, Senator Betsy Johnson was very clear on that point that we should not expect the legislature to fund future operations of the locks. And so it's important that we put that emphasis on the business plan so that we can make sure they're self-sustaining in the future. The legislature at the tail end of session did a lot on wildfire. They passed the Omnibus Wildfire Bill, SB 762, in the last day or two, and that it sets up a comprehensive statewide response plan to plan for and mitigate future fires, and it included about $200 million to fund all of those efforts. They passed a host of other bills relating to the 2020 fires and providing relief, which included $100,000 per year to Clackamas County to reimburse us for lost tax revenue.
How much was that?
$100,000 per year. And in addition to that, there were some other earmarks. There was $2 million to the Clackamas Fire District, $385,000 to the Molalla Fire District, $228,000 to the Canby Fire District, and $280,000 to the Estacada Fire District. So they spread the wealth across our fire districts. There were a handful of other important bills that we had supported that passed this session. The Recycling Modernization Bill, the bill that requires labeling of non-flushable wipes, a bill that prohibits online sales of e-cigarettes to limit youth from accessing nicotine products, and the tobacco retail licensing bill passed in the last couple days of session. That goes into effect January 1st and requires that sellers need a license either from the Department of Revenue or from a city or local public health authority to be able to sell their products, those products. The legislature also made historic investments in behavioral health and housing this session. And specific to housing, in the last few days, they passed a bill, SB 278, that provides an additional 60 days of eviction protection for tenants who can't pay their rent but can demonstrate that they've applied for rent assistance. So that's already been signed by the governor and is in effect. And I also wanted to call out a number of other projects that were earmarked for funding specific to Clackamas County. There was just about $5 million for the Clackamas County Fairgrounds, for the RV park, the livestock barn, and the emergency housing. $100,000 is coming to Clackamas County to pay for a public health mobile van. $500,000 is allocated to both Clackamas and Washington counties to help fund our share of a shuttle along I-205 between Bridgeport and the Clackamas Town Center. $500,000 for the Gladstone Library Project, and $750,000 for the Oak Grove Community Center project. And then all told, about $5 million for the various business recovery centers across Clackamas County. And then just a few other programmatic funding, statewide programmatic funding allocations that we care about. One is they've established a broadband fund at the state broadband office, and they've provided $120 million for that. So I anticipate there will be, we'll see grants coming, or grant opportunities available that we'll be interested in. They've established a county fair fund, which is, I think, similar to the courthouse fund that the legislature's established. And they've provided $10 million towards that, which will undoubtedly help to fund capital improvements at fairgrounds across the state. They've provided $10 million towards the Brownfield Fund and $10 million towards family treatment courts. And I understand that Clackamas County may be interested in being a pilot for one of those. So those are the highlights. And I'll just close and say, as tagging on to what Sue mentioned, the Capitol is going to be open very soon. However, they're going to be making long-in-the-making seismic repairs to the building that will essentially render everything closed except for the rotunda and the two chambers. And so while they're looking ahead at probably having a special session in September related to redistricting, more likely than not, most non-legislators will still remain outside the building until 2023.
Thank you, Chris, for that insightful report, and I want to tell you personally, congratulations. I have appreciated all your hard work and outreach, and you certainly provided this board opportunities to speak to our legislators, and I think that was very helpful, very good indeed. And, you know, folks, or commissioners, you've read the list as much as I had, and honestly, in my entire life in service, I've never seen funding opportunities like this, and so it's a huge opportunity for a lot of our organizations, groups, and businesses to move forward on their plans. One thing you didn't mention was the Founders Clinic, I believe received $600,000 for the relocation at Clackamas Community College. That's a huge boon for them. I think as the first funding will open up opportunities for them to apply for private nonprofits to help fund the rest of it. Nobody wants to be the first to do something like that. Nobody wants to be the first, so this was really good on that. Now, regarding Senate Bill 762, I heard this morning in a briefing that that is not complete, that in the next 100 days, they're still going to be working and nuancing on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's pieces that will need to go to the Department of Forestry for rulemaking, such as defining a wildland-urban interface, and that was a big sticking point in the last few days of session.
So, and will we have participation in that?
We certainly can track it and find ways to be involved.
Well, as
And I'm confident AOC will be very involved.
good, because we have counties in Oregon who right now we're in fire season right now. There's evidence of what happened yesterday, a fire above Estacado, which I have pictures on my phone if anybody is curious. And it was a little bit scary because of our dry, hot east winds that came down. Now, on the public corporation bill that passed for the locks, could you supply me with the language on that? And in that model, is there future operations funding recommendations? Since the legislature does not want to fund the operations on that, I understand. Do you know if there's a plan for that? Maybe I
Yes.
should be asking my colleague, Commissioner Schrader, on that.
Yes, we can provide the business plan, and that speaks to the
Yes.
how the locks will be self-sustaining and where those funds would potentially come from.
Okay.
Maybe we can get that document to the rest of the commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that particularly. On the $10 million fair, is that the form of a grant application? And am I to assume that if a county fair has a construction project underway or shovel-ready to go, they can apply for additional funds for that?
I think it's to be determined. My guess is they will need to put the details on what this looks like. There may be matching requirements. I don't know at this point, but
Okay.
it will be, I assume, some kind of grant.
Yeah, and could you notify me and us on that particularly?
Yep.
Thank you very much. I see a couple commissioners in the queue, and I'm sorry, I don't know who went first. I'm going to guess it was Commissioner Savas.
Okay, so my question is, how did items under Health and Human Services fare at the legislature on housing or some of the grants that we rely on, mental health and all that? Did we have any kind of a take on that, how we did overall? I'm just kind of concerned about some of the cuts that have been made and so forth, so especially in these times where the needs are higher than ever.
Yeah, I think, across the board, these programs did very well and were heavily invested in. And I should have mentioned that on July 27th, we are scheduled to have a policy session with you to go into much more detail on all of these. And we'll be providing our normal extensive report that goes into much more detail. So
Great.
we can get you that information by then.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, that was my question also. At this point, is there anybody who's provided a summary or kept an ongoing summary? I know a lot of things were up in the air. I did some talking to Ways and Means members as part of AOC, and I know that Senator Lieber had a lot that she was pushing through for behavioral health, and if she was successful,
Senator who?
Lieber, it's
Yeah.
going to be really game-changing. So I'm just really interested now that the gavel's come down where that, especially
Yeah.
those behavioral health
Yep.
investments
A
are.
couple days ago, I sent the full commission a list that broke a lot of that behavioral health and the housing bills and funding amounts.
Okay.
Broke it
There
out.
was a lot around workforce, which is a huge need,
Yep.
so I'm interested to see how that fared.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. And was this, just anecdotally, from your perspective, it seems like a very productive session, but very strained session. Do you
Yes.
think that the Zoom interface of conducting the hearings that way was good? I mean, what are your thoughts about how this all worked? Was it successful? Was it challenging? Was good policy made?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, they did get a lot done. I would say that one of the advantages they had going for them was they had an immense amount of money to work with. But when it came to Zoom, I think most of my colleagues and I agree that we would much rather be in person and be able to meet one-on-one than do it virtually.
Yeah, well, you can't stalk legislators in the building when they aren't,
Yeah.
when you're not there to like stop them and orchestrate that. So it was probably less lobbying going on than in previous sessions, I'm imagining, harder to have access.
Yes, very true.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Chris? Chris, thank you very much for yeoman's work. I appreciate you very much.
Thanks, and thanks for all of your help throughout session with advocacy.
You bet, you bet. Gary?
All right, so still on legislative topics, stay here, Chris. I don't know if Nate's going to come forward or not, and Gary Barth is online. So Chris, as Chris mentioned, back to the courthouse. As part of our courthouse funding, there was a budget note made by the legislature that said by 2022, we have to report back on very specific criteria of the public-private partnership model we are using for the county courthouse. There was no indication by the legislature that they are going to block or stop the funding, but it's unique that they asked for this information as part of our state funding. So just very, very quickly, Nate or Gary Barth online, give a quick recap of what's being asked, how we are confident that we can answer and provide this information. And we're sharing all this because, commissioners, the bid process starts in 2 days, on July 1st. And we're going forward with that process, but I want you to be fully aware of this request so there's no surprises. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Gary wants to jump in, but I'll just start by saying, with that authorization, there was the budget note, essentially amounting to a request by the legislature to provide some clarity on the structure, as Gary mentioned. Specifically, what's being asked for is further information about the funding agreements with the state. Those are underway. Those are being drafted and negotiated with the state as we speak. More information on sort of the financial model and the total cost of ownership, affirmation that the county will in fact own the building, more or less information that we already have and that we have provided in some form or another. My impression is that this is really a request for a unified report, closing the loop on a number of questions that legislators were asking in the closing days of the session. And as Chris mentioned, with Zoom and the other barriers to information sharing, there was just a lot of difficulty getting answers to those questions. I fielded more questions myself than I think I ever have in all my days here at the county, just trying to respond to various questions. So that's my impression. Thank you for allowing me to editorialize, but again, what we're being asked to provide is essentially a report in combination with OJD. And what we've been told by our state partners is that can be made to the emergency board. And I don't believe that the emergency board has been scheduled yet, but it sounds like they're returning to potentially quarterly sessions, which would mean we could target either a fall emergency board session or a winter emergency board session to provide that information with an eye towards really responding to this budget note by the end of the calendar year and having that authorization in hand at that time. Happy to answer specific questions. I know that was a quick
We're going to
overview.
thank you very much for that, Nate. We're going to allow Gary Barth to comment on this. Gary, are you there?
I am.
Go ahead.
Nate provided a great summary. We were thrilled when we saw the authorization of the $94.5 million in the Q bond for the project, and then paused a bit when we saw the budget note, but we convened our consultant team and our in-house project team late Thursday and again yesterday morning, including with staff from OJD. Had a collective discussion around the requests for information as part of the due diligence of the legislature, and we all came away 100% collectively assured that we have the information in hand and that we're very confident, and we all collectively agreed we're very confident moving forward with the procurement process.
Has the bond authorization been approved to sell the bonds?
The sale of the bonds has been approved. The expenditure of the bond proceeds is what's pending this report.
Okay. I can kind of understand that. So what has the sale of the bonds actually been completed is my question.
No sale of bonds have been completed. If you might recall, we were authorized to issue $31.5 billion in bonds in the last biennium, which would have been issued this past February, but we were not in position to utilize those funds. And we were going to ask for 31.5 that was approved, and we were going to ask for 63 million this session. Instead, the 31.5 sunset, we rolled it 31.5 into the 63, asked for the full 94.5, and that was approved.
Thank you, Gary.
So the issuance of those bonds would occur sometime in this upcoming biennium.
Okay, stay here. We have some questions. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
So my question is for Nate, and this did come as a surprise. And so my question is, what off-ramps are there should the legislature basically take an off-ramp out of the funding? I mean, I want to make sure that we can barely, frankly, financially, for the upcoming budget, support this project. So, we can't incur any more hits. So are there off-ramps?
Well, again, the request is to provide the report, and we hope to do that in the fall or the winter. And so if they do have any concerns about providing that expenditure authority, we would know that within the next, or by the end of the year. On our side, we are moving through the procurement process right now. And so what we're proposing to do is to issue an RFQ to the market to allow folks to begin their initial response. RFQ doesn't obligate the county to move forward with the project. It is a strong indication that we're serious about the project, which in fact we are, but we're not signing any contracts. We're not obligating the county to move forward with the actual project without seeing what's actually being proposed by proposers. Then in the fall, we'll whittle down the universe of proposers to 3 preferred proposers through an RFP process. Then the RFP process will provide an advanced design over the next several months with an eye towards actually selecting the preferred project company and signing those contracts middle of 2022. And so we have virtually the next year to work through the procurement process. And again, the procurement process isn't a legally binding commitment to the county to actually move forward with the project. It is, however, a strong signal of intent. But I guess more specifically to your question, if the state funding for some reason is not authorized, we should know that within the next several months, which is right in line with our procurement process, and we'd be able to adjust accordingly.
Okay, well, I know you're staying on top of it, but I think we're inclined, I am at least inclined to stay on top of this and making sure that don't have any stranded investments and we're not stuck with any extra cost or bearing the brunt of if the legislature goes sideways on us.
I think that's reasonable, Commissioner Savas. Gary Barth, now it's my understanding that the Oregon Department of Justice has approved, they're on board with this, as is Senate President Courtney and Speaker of the House Kotek. Is that correct?
I might have Chris Lyons kind of respond to Senator Courtney and Representative Kotek. I know that those two, the leaders of their houses, as well as the 3 co-chairs of the committees, have all considered this and all approved the authorization of the funds, but followed the advice of the Legislative Fiscal Office for this report.
Chris?
And the
Yes,
report-
I would just say this would not be in the authorization bill if they didn't support it. So I think their intent is clear. They're just doing their due diligence to make sure they fully understand the P3, which by and large is new to them.
Well, I understand that, and coming from the legislature, they probably have a little bit angst because the P3, this particular model, has not been done before with this large of authorization from our state government. And I understand their questions. I understand they want to hold our feet to the fire. I'll also make the public statement, maybe they should have held their feet to the fire to the Multnomah County Courthouse, who had continually come back for increased cost coverage of their courthouse. And I also will say, you cannot build a project now in this day and age, whether it's a P3, whether it's fully private sector, and I can give you hundreds of examples currently, that we're not going to run into a hiccup, that we're not going to run into something that wasn't planned for, because that's the nature of construction. We're just going to do that. And I think this board authorized the P3 process because we're trying to eliminate and reduce our risk as much as possible. I believe we are committed to this process. We're going to go forward on our deadlines, and I'm fully confident that we will be successful on this. I want to thank Chris. I want to thank Gary Barth for both your efforts in taking this to the legislature. And this was a lot of hard lifting to convince a very staid body to do something different. And my hat's off to the legislature for approving and thinking outside the box on doing something different with their funding models. And I'm hoping that this can possibly be an example to maybe to the rest of the counties on this. And Clackamas County will hold a hard fiscal line on this, and we will be involved with the contractors on the P3 process, as I fully intend on myself sitting at the table, asking the right questions. Thank you very much on this. I think we will move ahead with compliance on the budget note when we decide it's correct time to do so. I think Gary Barth and Nate Boderman, you will advise us on when to satisfy the requirements of the budget note going forward with that. I see no other comments. Gary, do you have anything to say on this?
Other to say, we're going forward in 2 days, July 1st. So thank you all for your updates and work. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, great. Up next, Gary.
Next, grant letter of support for House Bill 2001 implementation. Cheryl Bell, Assistant Director of Transportation, will present. There was a memo and draft letter in your packet. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm here to present a request from our long-range planning team for board to sign a letter of support for a State Department of Land and Conservation Development, or DLCD, grant request to support public outreach for the code amendment work we're doing in support of the housing project related to the state-required changes of House Bill 2001. This letter is a requirement for the grant application, and it's attached in your packets today. Clackamas County was awarded grant funds from DLCD in July of 2020, which were used to develop an initial public engagement plan to support the implementation of HB 2001. That award also funded multicultural outreach to build connections and explore how best to engage with communities not typically involved in the land use planning process. As part of the grant-funded consultant deliverables from that first DLCD grant, the county was provided recommendations for next steps in community engagement. And as expected, these recommendations included continuing dialogue with Vietnamese, Chinese, Slavic, Latinx, Native American, and Black communities, so very wide outreach. As we've seen from past efforts to effectively engage multicultural communities, hiring members of these specific communities increases involvement and creates meaningful opportunities for staff to listen to voices who are not typically heard in the land use planning process. Presently, we're wrapping up outreach conducted using that first DLCD grant, but the funding needed to be expended by June 18th, so it has expired. DLCD has now opened up a new round of funding that can be used to support the work to implement HB 2001. The request for funds will allow Clackamas County staff to deepen connections and continue outreach with communities not usually involved in land use planning, and to implement the identified engagement activities from that first grant process. As we develop and adopt HB 2001 code amendments into the county's zoning and development ordinance, or ZDO. We're requesting $60,000 in grant funding to support these activities. There are no matching funds required for this grant, and the staff time for work related to this grant is already included in the 21-22 long-range housing program budget. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about our grant request.
I see here on page 5, number 3, it says grant funds are provided on a reimbursement basis for products in accordance with the reimbursement schedule specified in the grant. Have you already incurred costs and/or products on this?
Not on this grant.
Okay, so it's, this is approved, it's for the future, what you may be doing. Okay.
That's correct.
I have some questions. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you. So I hear a lot about this issue from people throughout the county and people sometimes in cities that we know we're not in charge of the cities, but how are we coordinating with our partners in the other local jurisdictions on this issue?
For HB 2001?
Yeah, for the middle housing,
I believe I have Martha Fritzy, the project manager, on Zoom. Can we bring her in?
We'll wait for Martha Fritzy to come on Zoom.
So I know Martha's been key in this, and she's worked even at the DLCD level, sitting on part of the rulemaking committee. So she's been deeply involved in that work.
Well, while we're waiting for her, will
Yeah.
this grant allow us to coordinate with our local jurisdictions in getting engagement and more inclusive
I believe
input?
this
Or
is
is this
primarily,
just for unincorporated?
it's just for unincorporated because it's specifically related to our housing project work. And looking at, since the HB 2001 is state mandated and required, getting outreach as we put together how we're going to incorporate the required code language into our zoning and development ordinance. So getting feedback from the community directly related to our work.
Do we know if, like our other local jurisdictions are able to apply for this type of grant funding to do this similar work?
I would believe that they are, since it's a DLCD grant, it's probably open to all.
Okay. Because I'm just looking at, we have, half of our people live in unincorporated and half live in incorporated. And then we're looking at how do we as a larger county move into the future. This issue is really important. In a lot of places, people really, they don't want to have their neighborhoods really altered. And having some cohesive or connection or coordination of values of how we're moving forward might be useful. I don't know if there's a place for that here. I know Paul's been really engaged on this issue as far as unincorporated and what it means, but I'm hearing a lot about it as well. And I think the pandemic actually created a different idea too, because people are wanting to move out of more congested areas to where there's more space, and are we going to be giving up that option for space because our neighborhoods will be altered through this?
Thank you. Commissioners, I see on page 7, there's a letter penned by me in application. Gary, what is our action on this item?
So really, the grant, I have the authority to approve the grant, so I'm kind of surprised it went before the board. I simply didn't read ahead to check that. I apologize. Really, it's just the grant approval letter, the support letter, if you're approving that or not.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, please.
Oh, Paul, you're in the queue, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to build on Commissioner Fisher's comments that, there, for every action, there's, consequences, some intended, some unintended. And I think the concern is that we might be making neighborhoods less safe, okay, if the improvements don't really accommodate for safety, let's say sidewalks, drainage, things like that push pedestrians out into to the streets where there's no safe harbor, parking issues, number of things that affect the quality of life. So those are things that I'm very concerned about, and I hopefully we'll learn here pretty quick whether this legislation really has the intended effect, okay, and the cost of all the governments in this state trying to meet this goal, and then find out maybe it doesn't even do what it was intended to do. So I just kind of really wonder if this is a futile exercise with nothing but more risk incurred than benefit.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Savas. I will now accept a motion to approve the letter on page 7.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Savas and seconded by Commissioner Schrader to send a letter to DLCD. Any further Discussion. Seeing none, Shannon, please call the poll.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Cheryl, for coming today.
Thank you very much.
And I approve the grant, so you're good on that, too. All good. Okay, next. Chair, with your permission, can we jump ahead to the consent agenda items so the
Yes,
staff
please
waiting
do.
can move on to their day?
Please do.
Okay, we'll start with those staff in the room. So Ed, you're up, and maybe Teresa, you're up first with Health, Housing, and Human Services. I assume you're here for this, Ed, is that right? Great, all right. So number one, approval of an intergovernmental subrecipient agreement with the City of Oregon City Pioneer Center to provide social services for Clackamas County residents. Maximum value is $185,963, funded through the Older American Act Ride Connection Pass-Through Funds and Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. No county general funds are involved. Ed Johnson is here. He's Administrative Services Manager in Health, Housing, and Human Services, as Rod is out today. So Ed, just a quick 2-3 minute update on anything additional that I did not say, please.
Yes, Social Services Division seeks approval of this intergovernmental subrecipient agreement with the City of Oregon. I think you covered that. And to provide Older American Act funding services such as home delivered meals, health promotion activities, transportation, information, and referral services to residents living in Oregon City, Westland area.
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay. Number two, approval of a federal subrecipient grant amendment with Clackamas County Children's Commission to provide healthy family services. The amendment adds $91,823 for a maximum value of $1,797,977.95. The county general fund does pay for $45,000 of this cost. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, CFCC Division seeks approval of this amendment to the intergovernmental subrecipient agreement with Clackamas County Children's Commission to provide healthy family community-based services. These services are designed to increase the strength and stability of high-risk families prenatally through a child's third birth.
Any comments from commissioners? Seeing none.
Great. Number three, a renewal of a contract with Community and Shelter Assistance, CASA of Oregon. Value is $45,000 that CASA pays to clients' accounts. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod. Or, sorry, Ed. Sorry.
Social Services Division seeks approval to renew a contract with Community and Shelter Agency, CASA, of Oregon to provide individual account program to Housing Authority of Clackamas County and housing program participants. This program provides low-income individuals and families with access to individual development accounts to support their efforts in building financial assets. Clients save money each month and receive matching funds in their accounts. Funds can be used to purchase a home or vehicle or pay for post-secondary education at the end of their agreement period.
Any comments for the presenter? Seeing none.
Great. Number four, approval of a grant agreement with the United States Department of Treasury for emergency rental assistance funds. The maximum eligibility of $9,908,500 through the United States Department of the Treasury under the authority of Section 3201A of the American Rescue Act of 2021. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Ed.
I think they speak for themselves. These funds provided through the American ARPA dollars may be used to provide rental assistance and housing stabilization services to households impacted by COVID-19.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I just want to state a potential appearance of a conflict of interest because I do have a rental property.
Oh.
And when these come up, even though I won't be utilizing this resource, it could appear as such. So I just wanted to state that.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so how long are these resources designed to last? What, like the end date?
I think they are until, effective upon signature, until 2025. They have access to these funds. Let's see, first disbursement. Yeah, until 2020, apply for the, until 2025.
Okay, that's quite a ways out there. That's longer than I anticipated. I assume that there's some kind of a glide path, to help people transition into some more stable means of rent assistance or whatnot? Or is it, because you mentioned COVID, right? And I know that time, it doesn't seem, I mean, it's great that we got the funds, but it doesn't seem like at some point, we've got to be able to make sure we transition out, because I'm not sure they're going to extend it from 2025 out in the future, right? If COVID-19 is not with us, if we've conquered that.
Yeah, so I think, and may I ask Teresa to come forward, but these funds are to cover for residents, tenants who are in permanent housing. So the funds, I believe, will cover
Please
landlords.
introduce yourself.
Of course. Teresa Christopherson, I'm with Social Services. Yes, the funds are intended to be used for.
Just speak into the microphone. Don't just speak into the
Don't
microphone.
touch anything. These funds are intended to be used for short-term rental assistance to provide families that are currently in housing with stability to be able to maintain their existing housing. There are components of the program that include housing stabilization services. So we will, along with actually providing this rental assistance and some utility assistance, we will also be working with families to make sure that they're connected with long-term resources and that they're connected with other supports in their communities that can help them, again, whether it's with job assistance, whatever they need. So it's meant to be a more comprehensive program than just emergency rental assistance.
Okay, thank you. We're having so many conversations around this particular, not topic, but I guess topic. But thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, this might be a question for Mr. Madcore, but when you say COVID-related, what does that mean in the context of these dollars with what you're using for rental assistance? Is it, I mean, how is it COVID-related? I mean, what's the nexus?
So the dollars do come along with some specific criteria regarding eligibility. So for folks to be eligible for these particular dollars, they're going to have to demonstrate that they have had an economic impact that's related to the COVID emergency, whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's some other type of impact. So there are some specific criteria that surround the COVID emergency.
Okay. And that would be found in the bill?
Yes.
Itself, or the rules, the rulemaking, I'm assuming? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments for the presenter on this item? Seeing none?
All right, number 5, approval of an amendment to a revenue contract with Care Oregon for behavioral health services. The amendment adds $1,908,454 for a maximum value of $3,750,012 through Care Oregon. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Ed.
Behavioral Health Division requests approval of this amendment to a revenue agreement with Care Oregon, which provides funding for intensive care coordination for adults and children, substance use disorder care coordination, wraparound services, choice services, and administrative support.
Any questions for the presenter? Seeing none?
Number 6, approval of an agreement with Oregon Health and Science University for Institutional Review Board Study. Oregon Health and Science University will pay Clackamas County Health Centers $219,419 over a period of 4 years. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Ed.
Health Centers Division requests approval of an agreement with Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, to participate in an institutional review board. IRB, study focused on opioid addiction. The National Institutes of Health are awarding grants to support this research.
Any questions or comments for the presenter on this item? Seeing none?
All right, Ed, do any of these need to be at this week's meeting? Or can they all wait till next week?
I believe they can wait to next week. I don't think there's any. I believe they can wait.
Okay, they'll be on the July 8th business meeting. Thank you very much, Ed. Good job, well done. All right, next, Juvenile Department. Christina, please come forward. Number 1, approval of an amendment to the Intergovernmental Agreement with Multnomah County for assessment and evaluation service beds for Clackamas County youth. $126,449 funded through the county general fund. Go ahead, please, Christina.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. I'm Christina McMahon, Juvenile Department Director. This this amendment to the IGA is to continue an existing contract we've had in place since 2014. It serves youth that have a need for a higher level of substitute care placement outside of the home for short periods of time. And it is operated by the Donald E. Long Juvenile Detention Facility, and they have a separate residential program in that facility that provides this assessment and evaluation service. It is staff secure, which means we use this for kids who are more likely to run away or not stay in placement. It is funded through County General Fund, but I realized, I just came back from vacation today and looking at this with a fresh set of eyes, we did not note that for youth who are Medicaid eligible, we do receive 40% reimbursement per day for these beds. So that equals the bed days cost $255 approximately. We receive back $104 through our state agreement for Medicaid reimbursement. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that.
Any comments for the presenter on this? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, go on the July 8th business meeting. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Next, Sarah, come on down. North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District and the North Clackamas School District to provide summer enrichment programs for students. The intergovernmental agreement will provide up to $237,311 and is included in the fiscal year 21-22 North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District adopted budget. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Good morning. Yes, this is an agreement between NCPRD under BCS and North Clackamas School District. The $237,000 will fully reimburse the district for the costs incurred to provide this free programming to students within the school district. The summer enrichment programming will include aquatic safety and fitness classes at the aquatic park, both full-day and half-day summer camps for students. There's 48 proposed aquatic classes with 16 of those offerings in Spanish, and 4 weeks of full-day camp with 2 bilingual camps and 13 half-day camps with 8 camps being bilingual and 2 in Spanish. So we're very excited about this partnership and would like to ask for this to go on Thursday's consent agenda if possible.
Any comments for the presenter? This Thursday's a go.
Okay, it'll be on this Thursday. Thank you. Next, Business and Community Services, also Sarah. Approval of a federal financial assistance award of domestic grant between Clackamas County and the United States Department of Agricultural Forest Service, Mount Hood National Forest. Total funding is $24,897.60, with $19,152 in USDA Forest Service Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act of 2000 funds, and $5,745.60 from the fiscal year 21-22 Dump Stoppers Program funding. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Sarah.
Great, thank you. On this one, this grant is to provide operational funding for the Dump Stoppers Program, which happens under BCS and the Forestry Program. This amount covers about 2 months. The goals of this program are to locate and clean up dump sites on forested lands in Clackamas County, enforce anti-dumping laws and regulations, and when evidence is found, pursue, fine, and or prosecute offenders, and to educate the public about the potential consequences of illegal dumping. So this is another very important program to keep our forest lands clean, and this funding helps us operate it each year.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? Seeing none, Gary?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Next, Transportation and Development. Mike, come on down. 1, approval to apply for a raised discretionary transportation grant to replace the bridge across the Bull Run River. $9.2 million in grant funds are requested, with matching funds of $2.3 million, or 20%, which will come from the road fund, and $10,000 contribution from Weyerhaeuser. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Gary gave a real good summary there. It's we've applied for this bridge a couple times, haven't gotten it. So this is the RAISE grant, which used to be Build, which used to be Tiger, and we're ready to go, and we feel pretty good about it. There is also a letter of support in the materials.
Are these state or federal funds, the RAISE program?
Federal funds.
Okay. Does it require congressional approval?
I I believe it comes from an FHWA approval, but I don't know exactly how that process works, but I think it's administrative.
Okay, any other comments?
I do.
Yes, Paul?
So recently, there was a bridge that overturned on the Bull Run Bridge.
A truck that overturned,
What'd I say?
a bridge.
I'm sorry.
That scares me.
Okay, sorry. So my question is, I think we've learned that was overweight. That truck was overweight. Was that, do we know what the destination was or who contracted that work?
I do. I don't remember it. It's a contractor out of Portland who was on his way to do a job somewhere. I don't remember exactly the details.
Okay, so my concern, colleagues, is that we have a bridge that has been downgraded as far as its capacity, right? And so it's a fragile bridge. It's overdue for a rebuild, and we haven't got much in the way of support from our neighboring jurisdiction to support the reconstruction of this bridge. And I just want to make sure that we're not, or they're not, being part of any contractors that send overloaded trucks over that bridge.
Yeah, they weren't working for them, and they haven't been financial contributors. They have given us letters of support and all that. So they are the Water Bureau, Portland Water Bureau, is a supporter in that respect. But yeah, no, this contractor was not working for them.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we've asked for federal earmarks on this to help with Representative Blumenauer, correct?
We did. It's not currently in the federal bill, although there isn't an actual federal bill passed yet, but it didn't make the short list so far. We're going to keep fighting that angle too, but in the meantime, we have to get this request in because it's due in another couple weeks.
Well, if this truck was overweight and disavowed the weight limit sign that's posted, I don't know what we're going to do about that behavior. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, this bridge is going to be built parallel to the existing bridge so that circulation of our folks out that way is not going to be impeded?
I believe so. I don't remember the exact details. We've actually have done some design on it, but I believe that's because the current alignment is not ideal. I believe
Yes.
it goes next to it.
But this is a new bridge, it's not a repair of the existing 100-year-old bridge.
Yeah, that bridge was from the 1800s.
Got it.
Yeah, we're not going to repair it.
Okay.
Good. Any further questions for the presenter? Nope, seeing none, Mike, good luck on that.
All right, number 2, approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Happy Valley for traffic signal maintenance and transportation engineering services. Revenue varies between $500 and $3,000 annually, paid through the road fund. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, this basically is going to modify an agreement that's over 20 years old. It's pretty routine. We maintain the signals for every city in our county, and this just allows us to keep doing it and for them to pay us to do it.
Okay, any comments? Seeing none, it's a go.
Number 3, approval of a contract with Kittleson and Associates for the Arndt Road Extension Alternatives and Goal Exception Study Project. Total contract value of $210,000. Funded through the Community Fund and the Road Fund. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Mike.
This is accomplishing 2 goals, one of which is to look at the current Arndt Road goal exception that was approved a while back for an alignment that's not feasible. So we just want to freshen that up and just see, does it need to shift a little bit to a different alignment? But the reason Community Road Fund is contributing most of the money is we're also going to be looking at the 99E Barlow Road intersection. The Community Road Fund Advisory Committee had suggested that a project be included there using community road funds. And so we don't really have a good idea exactly what that would be, so this is going to help us flesh that out a little bit. So twofold process, and that's what we're looking to do by hiring this consultant.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Arndt Road, having driven it numerous times from Canby. So are you talking about straightening the curve and doing a new alignment? I mean, I know it's got a pretty steep curve, and then there's kind of a Y where it goes into Barlow, gets you on the road to the intersection.
Yeah, it's almost like a bypass, and so the current, there's a goal exception on the books. This work was done 15-plus years ago.
I remember.
That It had a connection, you go over 90 over the Malala River, and then basically this went through Canby Ford
Right.
and then curved around.
That's
And
right.
that one is problematic for a lot of reasons. And so the goal exception, the look is to say, hey, if instead we started it on the near side of the Malala River, like where Berg Parkway comes in, and then fly over. It's a big project and wouldn't happen overnight for sure, but we're just looking at, do we need to change where the alignment that's currently on the books needs to be?
Okay, so this is just a study for alignment, no imminent project?
That's all it is, and we'll work with the city of Canby.
All right, you're working with the city?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, it's a go.
Mike, and these all wait till July 8th?
They can.
Great, thank you. Last one is Technology Services. Dave DeVore is online. Approval to purchase HPE ProLiant servers for the county data center infrastructure. Cost is $228,032.64, funded through the Technology Services allocated budget, which does include general funds. Dave, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Commissioners, and Administrator Schmidt. This is a request to replace some of our aging servers on a scheduled basis. This will be 6 high-end HPE servers that will be replacing older servers in our county operations virtual service farm. These are the servers that do most of the applications for the county, and this will allow us to get rid of some ones that are starting to have some issues and allow us a greater performance. This is a scheduled replacement. That's part of our capital replacement fund through our county allocation. The general fund component is not direct. It is from the part where we actually allocate general fund funded departments. This is scheduled to, and part of our overall capital replacement fund.
Any comments for the presenter, Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, this says includes some general fund. How much general fund?
It's not direct general fund. It's we'd have to go back and look at how much we allocate the departments that they pay the allocation through general fund. So it'd be what we call non-departmental allocation.
And that's part of the budget we just approved.
It's part of the budget. This is complicated, Commissioners. It's a pass-through dollars, and I'm sorry I don't have an exact amount. It is general fund, but it's departments pay it to technology services, and some of them use general fund, some of them use other allocated dollars like road fund or Water Environment Services uses ratepayer dollars. This is an issue our new budget software is fixing. And I'm sorry I don't have an exact answer for you today.
So the departments pay basically allocated costs to tech?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Any other comments?
Correct.
Are you okay, Commissioner Scholl? Yeah, that's a go.
Great. Dave, can this wait till July 8th business meeting?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Commissioners. That is the consent agenda request. Back to the issues list. Advisory boards and commission appointments. Shannon, go ahead, please.
We have 2 advisory boards and commission appointments for today. The first one is the Clackamas County Community Health Council under the Health, Housing, and Human Services Department. This advisory board and commission holds a current roster of 11 members that serve 3-year terms. Members voted unanimously to recommend new member C. Kaiser to serve her first term. Next is the Audit Committee staffed by the Finance Department. They allow 9 members, and they are on 2-year terms. 3 applications were received and 2 applicants recommended. Joshua Cam, second term, and Sam Skull, first term. Those are all of the commissions for this week.
Move for approval?
Second.
Commissioner Savas has moved for approval for the ABC appointments, and Commissioner Fisher has seconded. Any other comments on this item? Seeing none. Shannon, would you please call the poll?
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Great. Next is review of your business meeting agenda for this Thursday, July 1st, 2021 at 10 a.m. You'll have your last COVID update, and we'll stop doing the updates now that the crisis is passing, but we'll give you updates as needed. But this Thursday will be the last formal COVID-19 update. We'll have a presentation by Chair Smith on her resolution affirming Clackamas County's commitment to history and culture. You have 2 public hearings. The first is the first reading of a board order for congestion around Barton and Carver Parks. Probably should have had that for last weekend, but that's okay. This was the timing of it. And then next, a reading for an ordinance amending the code, county code related to secondhand dealers. Both of those topics you've had prior policy sessions on. You have 1 item for the consent agenda. All of you just added a second one from today, and that is your meeting for this Thursday, the first business meeting of the new fiscal year. If you have any questions on any items, please let me know by Thursday, and we can get you those answers. Next, Commissioner Schrader would like to bring to you a request for a proposal on apprenticeship utilization, and there was a draft potential policy in your packet.
Well, thank you for that. This is a result of working with our workforce board, C2P2, and with the trade organizations. And what they're interested in, really the outcome is to get additional training for the trades as apprentice programs, particularly with public work projects. As you know, there is a dearth of people who can do this kind of work in the construction trades, and there's a lot of middle-aged, younger folks who actually are willing to enter into these particular, HVAC systems, so on and so forth. Electrical engineering, so on and so forth. So we did have a meeting with the trades the other day. I can't, Gary, what trade union was it? I want to say it's IBEW, but
Yes.
it was IBEW. So they have presented this prototype for us to consider, and what I'm asking for is to move forward with a work session, because I think that obviously looking at it, it would involve us working with contractors and, putting an overlay saying, we'd like you to train so many apprentices if you work on a public project for our county. And I think the big question is, they did say that it would not increase cost, but I do think that's something we ought to look at and consider just to analyze it and really understand what it means. I mean, apprentices usually do work for lower pay, and as they move up into, finally becoming a journeyman, but it really is a training opportunity.
Well, I love the trades. I have relatives, and nephews, and children of my friends who've done this, and I love building. I love all the aspects of this. You say that the apprentices are lower paid, but compared to a college education, you're being paid to learn. Holy cow!
It's a good deal.
It's a really good deal, and I know people who have never had the opportunity if they hadn't been able to be a paid apprentice, and the young people that I've seen go through this have been very prosperous, and they become leaders in their fields. And I would have never guessed that from some of these people who really were not college bound, but boy, they're sure doing a bang up job in the trades. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you kind of stole a load of my thunder, which is fine. I just want to just speak to that whole thing. I think my biggest surprise is some of the in-depth training they provide, and at really no cost, and they're earning while they're learning, which is huge. And the benefit is they don't need to save for a college education or spend monies or indebt themselves. So it's a win-win, and these trades need the people. So there's a need. It's perfect. So all I just kind of wonder is what we need to do from departments, so procurement and everything, to make sure that it fits right with all the regulations that we fit. But I'm all for it. I don't know the technicalities of the verbiage and the language and all of that, but it needs to comply with all our ordinances and so forth. So however we can make that happen.
That's why we'd like to have a policy session with you. Our staff has not reviewed this yet, and there is always an impact to us, both financially and at staff-wise. So I'd like our staff to fully give you all the data you need before you move forward.
Is this time sensitive, Martha?
Not particularly. I mean, obviously, everybody wants it done sooner than later, or at least get it done, but.
Are other jurisdictions considering this as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Well, when staff can get to it, Gary, and hopefully they will be as excited about it as we are.
But that is the only reason I brought it forward with this prototype, because we do need a work session for it. Okay.
So Gary, let's go ahead with a scheduled work session when staff can get prepared. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Next, Commissioner Savas would like to discuss Metro's congestion pricing study.
Yeah, very similar request here that we bring this to a work session. So I'll just go over a few of the points that I just want to bring up. So Metro initially messaged to us that they were going to basically work with the city of Portland to do local congestion pricing study, which really means basically a model which would toll the local roads. And so initially we were and I asked the question, and staff indicated to us at the time that that was only to the city of Portland, and Metro was a partner in this. And then we found out later, shortly after, that it actually expanded, and that Metro was doing it on behalf of the Metro region. And you know, it was only a study, but what raised my radar up on this one was that you know, there was not a lot of involvement from the local jurisdictions within the Metro growth boundary, and it was basically designed as I was told, a high level study, and they looked at and it went even farther than that to look at parking fees. It looked at a number of elements such as road user fee or VMT and some other mechanisms that were beyond really congestion pricing, but were under pricing, right, is basically essential. So I indicated at the last JPAC meeting that I had only because of the policy recommendations that were being suggested, because it was supposed to be something we're only going to accept. We're going to accept it, not adopt it, and it was a high-level study. But when they start crafting policy recommendations out of that, it kind of said, well, you don't really have enough detail in the study. So here you have this abstract high-level study, but then if you start deriving out policy recommendations and you haven't involved everyone, you don't have the detail, that raised my radar. And the other thing that I'm very concerned about, Mike's in the room, fortunately, I was going to say, Mike's still in the room. The other one is that, what I expressed at JPAC is I was worried about conflating or confusing an issue. So what's happening is, as new electronic vehicles or electric vehicles are coming out, there's going to be a move someday where gas tax is either phased out or it's less of the contributor to our road fund, right? So they're looking at what's called a VMT, some call it a road user fee. Well, because this is study embedded in that, and the recommendations in the language of the words that are being spoken by our Metro councilors, some Metro councilors, was that this is something that they should have some influence on. Well, it gets back to the sanctity or the sacredness of what we call our 50-30-20 split with the gas tax. 50% goes to the state, 30% goes to the county, 20% goes to the cities. We rely on that. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that thrown into the mix. So it also conflicts with our value statement that we did on tolling, you know. So I really think that we, you know, with staff's help, can craft a letter or a policy or a position for the county on this study to make sure that it's indeed, because while they say they're going to accept it, they want to do it under an adoption process. So I'm a little fuzzy about that, and I'm worried about some of the policy recommendations coming out of that. So,
Paul, what would you like this board to do? And frankly, I'm not all that familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, my request is to set up a work session on this topic and have staff make a presentation and some policy recommendations, and so we could take a position. So basically,
How timely is this? Are we under?
We need to do it before soon. Yeah, because the JPAC meeting is the third Wednesday. The third Thursday in July, so we need to get ahead of it.
Let's review this, and I'm going to reach out to some folks, and let's think about this and talk about it. Okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking a look at this and watching what's going on in our other jurisdictions. Gary?
Okay, thank you. Next, Chair Smith, a draft of a potential resolution on economic recovery in Clackamas County. There was a draft in your packets, Commissioners.
Commissioners, you know, we've had a lot of requests to do resolutions, and we know what the force and effect of law that resolutions have. Mainly, they're just opinions and ideas being put forth. And I've been thinking about it a lot. Other counties have done resolutions regarding COVID, regarding vaccinations, regarding masks. I want to take a little bit different take to it. I think going forward, our economy really is tipping in the balance. And I would like to make a statement regarding the economy on that. Just a reminder to some folks on what our county has been through and what we believe would like to happen or like to see moving forward. And so staff very nimbly put together for me some ideas. I just had a few ideas. We had about 4 or 5 departments come together and really got this out in short order, and my hat is off to them. Holy cow, this was really a remarkable effort. They brought me a draft. I added a few words here and there for consideration, but with that in mind, I intend to move this forward for adoption at this Thursday's business meeting. I would like anybody to offer their comments, wordsmith it perhaps today. If we can't get it done before the noon hour, we can come back early at 1 o'clock and finish it if we don't have enough time. I see a couple commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, it's pretty wordy, Commissioner, and that I won't say that necessarily concerns me, but there's a lot of grammatical cleanup that needs to be done on this, as well as I think if the purpose, the intention is economic recovery, and I just say from a business person's perspective, it really doesn't jump out at me as serving really, I think, some of the challenges that businesses face and the position of business. I mean, it does that a little bit. It does get there a little bit, but I think it needs to have more. If that's the goal, the emphasis should be more on that and less on some things that I think are relatively dated. I mean, in a sense, where's that at? I think in the numbered I was under now therefore, number 2, 3, and 4. I'm not really so sure that. Well, let's just say I got to find my notes here. I might be in the wrong place. But if you want to wordsmith it now, or maybe come back this afternoon, but I think it needs some work.
Well, I know there's a lot of confusion about what the governor has said in opening, and she still has reserved her executive powers through the end of the year. And the reason why that those are listed in there is because of that. And I have heard from many constituents, why hasn't Clackamas County done a resolution? And we know why we haven't done that. So, Paul, although you may not appreciate steps 2, 3, and 4, there's a good amount of constituents in Clackamas County who really wanted that language in there. If you see grammatical problems in this, please submit that to me. On that, yes, this is wordy, because guess what? We've been under this lockdown for 15 months. And there's a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of stuff that's going on, and we are not out of it yet. And frankly, we are not out of the restrictions yet, I don't believe. So if you have something particular.
So let's just talk about 2, not number 2 there, because, I know that when they brought you these, we didn't really know if the governor was going to lift the restrictions, right? Well, so I think that's already happened. Right? I mean, as of Thursday or Friday, the governor's lifted all those restrictions. We talked about it this morning. So number 2 is no longer, I don't think, very relevant.
I kind of think it is, because as our council has said, businesses can still require a mask mandate, and they can still, is that right, Stephen, look at proof of vaccine?
Sure. Like I said, it's a private business. They can require reasonable restrictions like that. And I actually just looked at the presiding judge's order for the Supreme Courts and the lower courts, and they said that the presiding judges in those facilities also retain the authority to have people wear face masks depending upon the conditions that they're existing. So the existence of face masks will continue. Certainly nothing about vaccinations, but the face covering component will continue for a bit.
Yeah, but I get that, but as it reads, the state government is encouraged to ease restrictions. We somewhat have done that. Maybe it needs to be reframed so that it's maybe state government needs to be mindful of about future restrictions, because there are no, as effective tomorrow, there are no real restrictions, right? Number 3, state government is encouraged to.
Just a minute, Paul. Okay, because you said state government is mindful of future restrictions imposed. Is that the word you want to
Well,
use?
something to that effect, where it's more relevant to it should recognize the changes that have already been done. We don't want to ease them more than they already been eased, right? Because they are, it's almost moot. But if you're concerned about future restrictions, I think it needs to be mindful of the impacts to businesses and so forth. So I don't have the exact verbiage.
Can you bring that back at 1 o'clock today?
I just didn't really realize that this was already slated for Thursday.
Well, because of what's happening so fast on the June 29th, I'm really, Commissioners, we've been under this for 15 months. I think all of us have an opinion on moving forward on this. And frankly, I do believe it's expected from our residents and our electorate that we take a leadership position on this. So if you would like to rewrite number 2 and bring it back this afternoon at whatever time Gary thinks we can do that, I'm certainly open to that suggestion.
Okay, then maybe that's what I'll do then, is just.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Instead of belaboring it now, maybe.
I'd appreciate that.
But again, I think if it's about economic recovery post-pandemic, I think that, it ought to really have some input or be designed for what businesses are struggling with today.
Well, businesses are struggling with all this. We can't just parcel out businesses on this, because all the effect, the cumulative effect of everything I state in here, not just I state, but, I just want to say, reiterate again, how many staff from different of our county agencies came together to add to this. It was Nancy Bush, it was from the EOC, it was from the Public Health Department. Some of our economic people have helped aided in this. And I think for no other purposes to remind us all where we've been and what we have gone through on this. Is there something else you would like to see stricken?
Well, it's not a matter of being stricken. I mean, I'll just go to work and work on,
Okay.
a recommended, I won't say a
Yeah,
rewrite.
well, this came out last week, so Commissioners, you've had ample time. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I did ask Philip, Public Health Director, to review this, and I got some of his input. I don't know that Public Health had their eye on this resolution in that process, so I wanted to make sure. He had, in addition to what Commissioner Savas said, that some of it is just, it's not relevant because the restrictions are lifted, so.
And what part would you say, Commissioner Fisher?
So that on the therefores,
What number?
Well, the second therefore is irrelevant because we don't have the restrictions. And the third therefore, the input I had from Philip is vaccines requirements for in-person school are proven effective public health interventions to reduce the risk of vaccine preventable diseases. Businesses should have the right to make their own decisions and policies. Employers should work to encourage vaccinations among workforce to reduce business disruptions. So if we are going to have wording about it, we should have the wording that we are encouraging vaccinations, because as we can see, that is truly what gets the numbers of this pandemic down. And just on a personal note, I get concerned about us giving contrary advice different than what public health would give. I think it's important for us to continue to encourage and make available vaccinations, and that businesses must have the autonomy to do what they need to do for their industry. I can just give you one example. My husband has a theater company. He's looking at going into production, and because he has to get rights to do these productions, there are requirements that he has to meet in order to produce a theater production locally. And if we need to allow entities and businesses to do what they need to do to recover. We should not be stating things that might be considered contrary to what some of those requirements might be.
Is there something particular in a statement here that you would like to see revised with that?
Well, I mean, I
thinking in
think
mind?
that
Is there something in here
State government
contrary?
is encouraged to discourage businesses and schools from requiring vaccine for employment or to attend schools. So that is something that, there's some federal, not necessarily federal requirements, but businesses, at least with the different actors' equity or different groups like that, and I'm sure there are many others that really will be requiring vaccinations for certain types of employment. When people are in close contact, different industries, we just shouldn't be discouraging vaccination as the public health authority for Clackamas County.
Okay.
So that's a concern.
What if we struck out number 3, striked it out?
Yeah, I mean, that would be, I would suggest striking that out. There's a lot in this that I actually really liked, because I like the parts that are focused on economic recovery. The other input that I had from Philip is in regards to the whereas, the 10th whereas.
Which number?
The 10th.
Okay.
Whereas it says the vaccination rate will never be 100%. His input was that the 10th whereas is medically inaccurate that folks with underlying health conditions cannot be vaccinated. Usually only a very small portion of the population that has a severe allergy to a vaccine ingredient. So he had recommended removing number 10.
I really like number 10. I will not go on number 10.
Well, I would have a concern about putting anything that's medically inaccurate in a resolution.
I don't think it's medically inaccurate, because I do not think that we get 100% vax rate on anything in this country.
Well, I mean, he's talking about the part that people with underlying health it says, this is what this says. Whereas the vaccine rate will never be 100%, and businesses requiring vaccines could be a barrier for access to employment, especially for, and it talks about marginalized communities, those with underlying health conditions. So it's basically saying that there's a large percentage of people with underlying health conditions that can't be vaccinated.
Actually, it does not say that. I think you're reading something into that that isn't true. What it says is the vaccination rate will never be 100%. Maybe that should be a period. But we need to recognize that there could be barriers to employment. If an employer requires a vaccination to marginalized communities or those people with underlying conditions, many people cannot take the vaccination for underlying conditions and or religious exemptions. I think those particular populations, no matter how small, should be recognized, because we do that in our diversity and equity groups, correct? So why can't we do that in this as well? Because there is a segment of population, and it covers all economic, social groups, that some people cannot be vaccinated, and some people do have a religious exemption, and that has not been honored. I don't believe it's been honored whatsoever. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I was just, it's on that one there. My input on that, for example, is that that would be a restriction on businesses, right? And there's certain businesses in the medical industry, doctors' offices and so forth, private, that require either mask or vaccines or encourage that. So it's, as a business owner, business owners typically don't want restrictions or regulations, and this comes off as a restriction or regulation.
Actually, it doesn't. I don't see how. The language is, can we reword this somehow so it does not come off to me as a restriction? To me,
businesses requiring vaccines could be a barrier for access to employment.
And the word is could be. There could be a barrier.
But so then when you get back to under the therefores, there is an element that speaks to that. State government is encouraged to discourage businesses and schools from requiring. It might be part of their industry.
But we took out that one, Paul. We strike out number 3.
Right, but I'm saying the intent is embedded in there, and I think if that's, and I need to scan through the entire document to make sure that it's consistent. But if the theme is not on restricting a business's ability to do what they choose to do for whatever line of industry they're in, we shouldn't be suggesting that they should be discouraged from anything.
I'm not suggesting that they be discouraged. I am recognizing a marginalized sector during this entire debate of the last 15 months in our efforts to get more and more people vaccinated, that I do think that we have to mention that there are some people who are marginalized, some people who have religious exemptions who cannot take the vax. That is the point of this, and it should be noted. And it should be noted, this is a barrier to employment. And one of the hardest aspects of getting our economy back running in this county is getting a reliable workforce to show up. And if we continue with these barriers, insisting on every single employed person in this county be vaccinated, I believe that is a huge barrier to employment.
Okay, well, if that's the purpose, then I get that maybe the title's completely wrong and it's not about economic recovery. See, that's my point.
That is too. Having employment, having our people fully employed without barriers to employment is economic recovery.
Well, I don't want to argue this. We're short on time, so.
Well, we can bring this back this afternoon.
So,
And I
Chair Smith?
suggest that both commissioners,
You know,
Commissioner Savas
I
and
have
Commissioner-
lunch plans today. I can't work at lunch. But I think that what we can recognize, which I think is an important value, is that people should have the choice. Like, some people will choose not to be vaccinated. Some people, it's not recommended that they be vaccinated due to health concerns. I mean, I think that's important. We won't even reach 70%. We aren't even going to reach herd immunity. In fact, we can't reach herd immunity because there's a whole bunch of kids under age 12 that can't even be vaccinated. So I think if we are going to come to a place where we are recovering, I mean, let's look at what we're looking at. We're looking at moving forward in a way that creates economic activity where we're moving forward. And I really am concerned about any messaging that we do not support vaccinations, because if that Delta variant takes off and there are certain communities that have less vaccinations and they're all at a church service and that takes off and that whole community is going to be affected, that's really concerning to me. I think our messaging, yes, we absolutely support personal choice, personal freedom, no question. As a county government, as the law of this state and of this country, there's not been any policy to require vaccination.
Well,
but if we go contrary to public health advice, ooh, that's a tough one. I don't want that to be on me
this is not
facilitating that.
contrary to public health advice. I believe you're reading too much into it. I am the commissioner that has sat at this dais week after week saying that vaccinations are a choice, but we have these programs available. And Commissioner Fisher, I just believe that you have singled out churches specifically, and I think our church community has suffered very much for their not being able to exercise their religious freedom in being able to attend the services they wanted. So that's why that religious exemption is very, very important. I have never, ever discouraged anybody from a vaccination, and you know that.
Oh, I do
And I
know
do
that.
not believe that this document does that either. Do you have specific language that you would like to be submitted in place?
Well, I would stick with my public health director in his concern that whereas is not accurate,
Which whereas?
the one that we're talking about.
I do think it's accurate. Maybe I will get Emily, let's get Philip on the line and take a look at that. Commissioner Scholl, you haven't said anything.
No, I'm good.
Hey, Commissioner Schrader.
I was going to say, why don't we have Philip take a look at it, and maybe you could talk to Philip directly?
Yeah, I can talk to him at lunch.
Why don't you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I just want to say, with the reference to schools, have we talked to the schools as far, I mean, to me, it seems like that is, we're, I won't say overreach, but it feels a little bit like that if we haven't really got the input from schools themselves. Let's face it, the spike of COVID cases went up when schools went back.
Yep.
When schools closed, notice that it has dropped significantly. It's a fraction of what it was. So there is a relationship between congregate settings and COVID.
Well, you know what? If you've ever had kids in school 3 to 4 weeks after schools begin, kids come home sick, regardless of the virus, regardless of the bacteria. It just happens because they slobber all over each other. I mean, that's just the way it is. And, you know, I don't know what to tell you about that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make a call. Commissioners, you're encouraged to submit any additions or modifications to me by this afternoon. I will get on the phone with Philip, and we will go over some language on this. Anything else, Gary?
We still have more on the issues list, but we can do that this afternoon. So would you like to reconvene at 1 o'clock or finish this business after your final policy session today?
1:30, please. I need to be
1:30,
able to, I have some things to do at lunch.
Yep.
All right, we'll do this at the end of the day then. We'll finish
Thank
this.
you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will recess until 1:30.